Welcome to this week's edition of Outdoors Online, a weekly webcast produced by the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm your host, Mike Anderson. My guest this week is Education Supervisor Marty Eglund. Today we're going to talk about volunteers and why we need volunteers for our programs, Marty. What programs are we talking about?
You know, probably our flagship program, Mike, is our hunter education program. It's the biggest educational program we have, and that program is, legislatively mandated program. If somebody wants to hunt in North Dakota and they're born after December 31st, 1961, they're required to take it. So that's our biggest program. But in addition to that, we have a whole variety of educational programs such as, Hooked on Fishing, National Archery in the Schools program, trapper education, and of course we do have a lot of smaller standalone specialty type programs, and so the need is there for outdoor education.
So why do we need volunteers for this?
Part of it is just the size of the department, and a lot of people don't realize we have one of the smallest game and fish agencies in the nation, and most of those people have day-to-day jobs, whether it's managing fisheries, or wildlife areas, administration, and that's the biggest need for volunteers, is just a pure lack of manpower.
Sure. How many volunteers currently do we have in the state?
We roughly average around 900, give or take, and that number floats up and down a little bit just due to people coming in and leaving the system. But currently about 900 volunteers, about 700 plus 700 to 750 of those teach hunter education, and then the remainder of those filter down into our other programs.
For example, like Hunter Ed, what would a volunteer do for our Hunter Ed class?
It really varies on the position in there, and a lot of times our hunter education people will teach in a group setting, and usually there'll be a lead instructor, and they'll be charged with setting up the course, contacting us in Bismarck, getting the course listed online, ordering materials, coordinating everybody's schedules, and then of course teaching the class. The class itself is a minimum of 14 hours. And they can certainly teach longer than that if they want, and then of course test night and wrapping up and getting the results to us. A lot of it is classroom type teaching curriculum, but there's a lot of hands-on portion too. The students need to learn firearms handling. They teach them things, how to get in and out of a motor vehicle with a firearm, how to cross a fence. So it's kind of a combination of classroom learning and hands-on, and some will even have a live fire field day after the end.
How many students typically in a year do we put through a hunter education course?
It varies. A good average about 5,500, anywhere from 5 to 6,500 students in a year. So, but we're running over 5,000 students a year through this program.
How many hours would a volunteer have to put in?
That varies considerably. We have people that'll teach the whole course. We have people that volunteer for us on a weekly basis throughout the year, and people that put hundreds of hours in, and then we have people that put just a few hours a year in, and we'll have someone who maybe will teach a whole class. Sometimes they teach multiple classes in a year, and then we have people that, for example, there's segments in hunter education, and maybe we have an instructor and he happens to be a bow hunter, and maybe he just comes in for a couple hours one night and teaches the bow hunter portion of the hunter ed. So really we can tailor the time commitment to whatever people can give, and people are busy, we understand that, and if all you can donate is a couple hours of time, we can find a place for you to volunteer for us.
And we're always looking for volunteers statewide, not just in the big cities.
Absolutely, and those smaller communities, it's vital too. People still really have a kind of a connection to the outdoors there, and they still want to get out and hunt and fish, and of course with a smaller population there's only so many people that have a desire to volunteer, so we need them in all of our communities. So our programs are accessible, hunter ed in particular, so people aren't having to drive an hour to take a class.
How can you become a volunteer?
Well, it's pretty simple. Typically you can give us a call down at the education office, and our phone number is 701-328-6615. You can send us an email on the general info email to Game and Fish, and they'll forward it to us, and we will send you an application. Now, upon receiving your application back, we will do a background check, and we do background check all of our volunteers. Our volunteers, for the most part, are working with children, so we'll do that, and we'll recheck our volunteers every 3 years. Passing the background test, then we'll hook you up with a current instructor, and it's kind of a mentoring program and you'll start working with someone who's already in whatever discipline you're in. If it's trapper's ed or you know, hooked on fishing or hunter ed, we'll get you hooked up with an appropriate person, and they can mentor you in and teach you how that program operates. For example, our fishing programs, if you know how to tie a knot and bait a hook, that's all we need. We'll teach you how to do the rest. And you know, you don't have to be an expert in any of these disciplines. If you have a desire to volunteer, we can find a spot for you.
Okay, could we do these programs without volunteers?
Absolutely not. You know, when you're looking at 900 volunteers and a staff of 163 people, we've got 5 to 6 times as many volunteers as we do staff on hand. We just would cease to operate our educational programs without volunteers. They're just paramount to keeping these running. And of course, we are always looking for people, because just like, you know, one day, you know, you and I, Mike, will retire and we won't be here. The same thing happens to our instructors.
Sure.
You know, they move on, different stages of life, whether it's time commitment, you know, heading down south for the winter. We do lose, you know, instructors over years, and we continually need to replace those. We've got a lot of instructors now, but we lose some every year, and it's a continual process to, you know, replace those.
Sure. Thanks for joining me today, Marty.
You bet. Thank you.
As Marty just mentioned, if you'd like to volunteer for hunter education, aquatic education, trappers education, or any other programs, you can contact Game and Fish at 701-328-6615, or you can email at ndgf@nd.gov for more information. For Education Supervisor Marty Eglin and the rest of the staff here at the Game and Fish Department, thanks for joining us for this week's Outdoors Online. We'll see you again next week.